I woke up screaming. Not from a nightmare but from the cold, stomach-twisting reality staring back at me in the mirror across the room. My scalp, my once thick chestnut hair that I had spent years growing, pampering and styling, was gone. Every strand, every curl, every bit of the identity I'd carried with me since girlhood, shaved down to raw skin. I stumbled closer, my bare feet dragging against the hardwood floor, my hand trembling as it rose to touch what I didn't want to believe. Smooth, thick, unforgiving. My knees buckled. My reflection was unrecognizable. A stranger stared back at me, hollow eyes, swollen lips, trembling shoulders, and a bald head that mocked me with its bareness. And then the cruelest truth hit me all at once. This wasn't just any morning. This was the day before my wedding. The hair I had dreamed of pinning with pearls. The waves I imagined cascading down my back beneath my veil. The look Daniel said made me radiant. Gone. Ripped from me overnight like some sick, twisted joke. No, 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 no. The words tumbled from my mouth, weak, useless, drowning beneath the rising tide of panic. I clawed at my scalp as if I could undo it, as if I'd wake up and find it all a hallucination. But the truth was carved into the skin of my head. Brutal, undeniable. The sound that tore from my throat was primal. It rattled the house so raw it barely sounded human. Within seconds, my mom appeared in the doorway, clutching her coffee mug so tightly it spilled down the sides, her eyes bulging as they landed on me. She gasped, the sound sharp enough to slice through the silence. "Oh my God, your hair," she whispered, her voice breaking. But then I heard it. From down the hall. A laugh. Deliberate. Bucking. I froze, my stomach dropping because I knew that laugh. I had heard it 1,000 times before. When I failed, when I tripped, when I embarrassed myself, when she found joy in my pain. It was Melissa. My sister. And in that moment I knew with bone-deep certainty. This wasn't an accident. This was sabotage. And she had chosen the cruelest day of my life to do it. My legs carried me before my brain could catch up. Fueled by adrenaline, fury, and humiliation, I stormed down the hallway, my robe flaring out behind me like a battle flag. The sound of her laughter still echoed in my skull, every note a knife, every giggle a fresh wound. Melissa didn't even flinch when I burst into her room. She was sprawled across her bed in her silk pajamas, scrolling lazily through her phone, that smug smirk plastered across her lips. Like she had been waiting for this. "You think this is funny?" I screamed, my voice cracking under the weight of betrayal. Her eyes flicked up and she tilted her head with mock innocence. "What are you talking about? Don't you dare play dumb with me." My hand shook as I pointed at my scalp, my nails digging into my own skin. "My hair is gone, Melissa. Gone. And you," my throat closed up as my voice faltered. "You did this." She leaned back against her pillows, a glint of satisfaction flashing in her eyes. "Why would I waste my beauty sleep shaving your head?" she purred. My chest heaved. He was taunting me. She wanted me to lose control. "You're jealous," I spat. The word left my lips like poison and her smirk only widened. "Jealous," she echoed, her laugh soft, wicked. "Please. Just because you're marrying Daniel tomorrow doesn't mean I care." But her tone betrayed her. I could see it, the twitch of her jaw, the flare of her nostrils. He cared. He cared too much. I stepped closer, close enough to see the faint traces of hair on her silk pajama sleeves. "Evidence. Proof. You've always hated me," I whispered, the words trembling with rage. "Every time I had something good, you found a way to poison it. And now you've taken the one thing I couldn't replace." Melissa's lips curled into a sneer. "Oh, come on. It's just hair. You can wear a wig at your precious little wedding. Nobody will even notice." Her cruelty slammed into me harder than the truth of what she'd done. My vision blurred with tears, not of weakness but of fury. I wanted to slap the smugness off her face, to claw the satisfaction from her eyes. But deep down I knew she wanted that. She wanted me to break, to explode, to ruin myself before I even made it to the altar. So instead I whispered the words I knew would strike her where it hurt most. "You'll never win, Melissa. Not this time." For the first time that morning her smile faltered. The argument with Melissa had carried down the hall, loud enough to wake the entire house. Before long, our mother appeared at the door, drawn like a moth to chaos. She was as composed as ever, robe neatly tied, hair falling into perfect waves even at this hour. Behind her stood my father, wordless as always, his arms crossed as though he were bracing for impact. For a brief moment there was silence. Then their eyes landed on me, on the hood slipping back from my head, exposing the awful truth of what Melissa had done. Their shock was visible but fleeting. My mother's face hardened almost immediately, as though disbelief was safer than accepting what her eyes had just seen. I tried to explain, my voice breaking as I spoke, but Melissa was quicker. She had always been quick to twist, quick to paint herself as the innocent one, quick to put me on the defensive. And as she wove her soft words into the room, words laced with practiced fragility, I realized she didn't even need to try that hard. My mother's mind had already decided. The weight of her disapproval pressed down on me, cold and familiar. She didn't see a daughter betrayed and humiliated. She saw a bride unraveling, a woman too fragile to withstand the pressure of her own wedding. In her eyes, Melissa wasn't the culprit. I was the spectacle. My father's silence only deepened the wound. He stood there watching but never once stepped forward. Never once spoke on my behalf. It was the same silence that had followed me through my childhood, the same absence disguised as neutrality. It told me more clearly than words that I was alone in this battle. Melissa, meanwhile, thrived in the performance. Her tears were perfectly timed, her posture that of a wronged angel. She didn't need to accuse me directly. All she had to do was look fragile enough to plant doubt. And she did it flawlessly. By the time the conversation ended, the balance had shifted entirely. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the unstable bride, the irrational sister, the one who couldn't be trusted with her own story. The way my mother looked at me, tight-lipped, weary, disappointed, told me everything. She didn't believe me. She didn't want to. As Melissa lingered in the doorway, catching my eye with a barely concealed smirk, the truth hit me like ice. This wasn't about ruining my hair. It was about ruining me. About dismantling me piece by piece until no one believed a word I said. For the first time, I wondered if the baldness wasn't the real attack at all. Maybe it was only the beginning. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the house still felt suffocating. I had barely slept, my mind replaying Melissa's smirk and my mother's dismissive eyes again and again. No matter how many times I rubbed my scalp as though touching it might undo the damage, all I felt was the humiliating truth of bare skin. My wedding was a day away. A day. And instead of slipping into the happiest morning of my life, I sat at the edge of my bed wrapped in shadows, trying to imagine how I would walk down an aisle bald. But the greater dread wasn't my reflection, it was Daniel. How could I possibly face him? Would he even recognize the woman he had proposed to, the one whose hair had tumbled over her shoulders the day he slipped the ring on my finger? Would he still want me, or would he see only ruin? When he finally arrived that afternoon, his knock on the door struck like a verdict. My chest tightened as I opened it, my hoodie pulled tight, strings cinched so only a sliver of my face showed. His eyes flicked to my appearance, his brows knitting with confusion. I couldn't speak at first. My throat felt raw from hours of holding back tears. When I finally loosened the hood, bearing the destruction Melissa had left behind, the silence that followed was louder than any scream. Daniel's face shifted, first shock, then something unreadable. His lips parted, but no words came. That silence stretched between us, long and unbearable, until it became its own kind of judgment. I tried to explain, to tell him what Melissa had done, but the words came out messy, desperate, the kind that sounded more like excuses than truth. He listened, but he didn't move closer. He didn't reach for me. And that distance between us hurt worse than Melissa's cruelty. What terrified me most wasn't that Daniel might not believe me. It was that he might not care enough to fight for me. That in the space of one night everything we had built could crumble, not because of what Melissa did, but because of how little he could withstand it. By the time he left that evening, I felt smaller than I ever had in my life. His parting words were polite, almost careful, but they carried no fire, no certainty. It was as if he were already weighing whether love could survive this kind of ruin. I realized then that Melissa had struck deeper than I first imagined. She hadn't just taken my hair. She had planted a seed of doubt, one that was already spreading into the heart of my marriage before it even began. And if Daniel faltered now, on the eve of forever, what chance did we have? The church air was thick with perfume, candle wax, and expectation. Beneath my veil, the wig clung to my scalp, styled to perfection, curls cascading just as I had always dreamed they would on this day. Only I knew the secret underneath, the bare, raw scalp Melissa had carved into me with her cruelty. But today I vowed no one else would. Not if I had any control left. I walked the aisle with a trembling grace, every step echoing like a battle drum. My heart pounded louder than the organ's hymn, but I forced my smile, keeping my chin high. The whispers that had haunted me in the bridal room dissolved into silence as the guests marveled at the illusion I wore. For a fleeting moment I believed I had won. That I had reclaimed what Melissa tried to steal. Then it happened. As I passed the second row, where she sat draped in smugness, Melissa leaned forward. A soft, saccharine smile plastered on her lips. She reached out, as though adjusting my veil, as though offering some tender sisterly touch. But her hand darted with precision, brushing against my head, tugging at the wig with just enough force to feign accident. Gasps tore through the church as the wig shifted, tilting precariously. I caught her eyes in that moment. They gleamed with satisfaction, waiting for the big reveal, waiting for me to crumble. But she underestimated me. In one sharp movement, I caught the wig before it slipped further and straightened it with the same composure a queen might adjust her crown. The gasps that had filled the air transformed into murmurs of relief, but I wasn't finished. Not yet. I bent slightly, close enough for only her to hear, and whispered through my smile, "You should have prayed for forgiveness instead of plotting." Before Melissa could react, I took a deliberate step back, my heel pressing against the hem of her gown. She stumbled forward with an undignified yelp, arms flailing, crashing against the polished pew with a thud that echoed like divine judgment. Her face twisted, her hair disheveled, and her perfect composure shattered into humiliation. The guests gasped again, this time not at me but at her. I didn't flinch. I didn't help her up. Instead, I walked forward with unshaken grace, my veil and wig still in place, my dignity intact. Every eye that had once waited for my downfall now followed me with a new understanding. I wasn't the victim today. Melissa was. As I reached Daniel at the altar, I could still hear her scrambling behind me, her humiliation as loud as the organ itself. And for the first time in days I smiled, genuine, sharp, victorious. But I knew this was only the beginning. Because if Melissa thought I would stop at a stumble in church, she had no idea what kind of revenge I was capable of. The vows blurred in my ears as the ceremony pressed on, but my mind wasn't on Daniel's trembling voice or the priest's blessings. My focus remained sharp, like a blade aimed squarely at Melissa. She sat there, fuming in the front pew, pretending composure while her cheeks burned crimson. Her stumble had cracked the mask she wore so carefully, but cracks weren't enough for me. Not anymore. The time for humiliation was ripe. As the priest pronounced the ceremonial words, I glanced at the congregation, rows of curious eyes, still whispering about the scene Melissa had caused. I could feel the weight of their curiosity pressing against me, waiting for another twist, another scandal. They didn't have to wait long. When it was time for the exchange of rings, Daniel reached into his pocket. I held out my hand, smiling, but instead of letting the silence swallow the moment, I spoke, my voice clear, sharp, slicing through the room. "Before I wear this ring," I began, "I want to thank someone here for making me realize who my true family really is." Every head turned. Melissa's shoulders stiffened. He knew. I shifted, facing the guests, my veil shimmering beneath the chandeliers. A week ago I was betrayed in the worst way a bride could be. My own sister thought it amusing to shear me bald, hours before my wedding day. She wanted me humiliated, destroyed. She wanted to be the story. Gasps filled the sanctuary. Eyes darted to Melissa, who now squirmed in her seat, her mask shattering completely. "But here I stand," I continued, my smile unwavering, "not broken, not ashamed, but stronger and more determined than ever. because while she tried to strip me of my crown, she only reminded me I was already wearing one no one could take. A murmur rose like thunder, people whispering in disbelief, some even glaring at Melissa. Her mouth opened, desperate to deny it, but the congregation had already chosen sides. The evidence was written all over her face, the fury, the shame, the guilt. And then for the finishing strike, I reached into the pocket of my gown and pulled out my phone. With one click, the speakers, those same speakers Melissa had tried to sabotage earlier, crackled to life. A video began to play. Her voice. Melissa's laughter. The recording I had taken the night she gloated over my shaved head. "Let's see how she marries looking like a plucked chicken." Her voice rang through the church, sharp and unmistakable. The crowd erupted, gasps, whispers, some even shaking their heads in disgust. Melissa's face drained of all color. She looked small, cornered, stripped bare before the very people she lived to impress. I tucked the phone away, letting the silence fall heavy before I spoke one last time. "So today I don't just marry Daniel. I also bury every last attempt to destroy me. And I promise you all one thing, Melissa will never cut me down again." The applause came like a tidal wave, drowning her humiliation, lifting me higher. Even Daniel's stunned expression melted into admiration as he slipped the ring on my finger. Melissa, meanwhile, bolted from the pew, her heels clattering against the floor as she fled the church, chased not by me, but by the shame she had brought upon herself. And as the organ swelled with triumph, I finally felt it. Peace. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a victory. The wedding ended with whispers not about my baldness, but about how Melissa had tried to humiliate me and ended up exposing her own cruelty. People saw her desperation, her envy, and it clung to her like a shadow. My wig stayed firmly in place, my dignity intact, while Melissa stood in the center of her own chaos, unraveling in front of everyone. That night, I didn't feel like the broken bride she tried to create. I felt like a phoenix that had risen from ashes she herself had lit. But my story doesn't end here. This was just the beginning of a storm I would unleash, one that Melissa could never have prepared for. And before we dive into that, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe, because your support keeps these stories alive. And remember, new episodes drop every single day, so you won't want to miss what comes next.